So welcome back. I believe this is part 6 of the LS build for the 350 swap into that car. So today we have got some headers that we are going to be throwing on. Last episode we put on this sweet LS2 intake manifold with this 92mm throttle body. So today we did the intake, now you're doing the exhaust. And we have a very special, very interesting exhaust. So these are short tube headers. They're just universal LS swap headers. So obviously it has this thing right here where you can weld on a pipe and it can rotate, so you can put it on either which way you want, like that. And it's got a spot for your O2 sensor. So I'll give you a second to guess how much I spent on these headers. And I'm sure you've seen the title of this episode. These are actually Temu headers, and I spent a whopping $80 on both of these short tube headers. So let's talk about, I'm gonna do a quick review on these headers. So I took these headers to my shop. I showed it to my shop guys. They were kind of impressed by it. Not like crazy impressed, but for $80, it was not bad. A couple of things they noticed that were good. First off, they welded the inside this flange, which is good. Some people just weld the outside and call it a day. Another thing, obviously, they have ports for the O2 sensor. It's another good thing. And I think that was really it. The welds didn't look terrible. I mean, they're whatever. But I think that was really just the big two things that pointed out. Now, some flaws of these headers. Mostly, the biggest one I would say is probably, you can't really see it very well. Unless I got a flashlight and showed it. But inside there's supposed to be a little cone or a triangular pointy thing. There's a name for it. I forgot the name for it. But it's supposed to have one. And it does not have one. There's nothing in there. They just connect into one tube. So there's nothing in there. Another thing about these headers that might be a flaw is they're very, very basic headers. These headers are very basic. They have the feeder, or what do you call these? The collecting tubes, which is just the tubes coming off here, or the size is 1 inch and 1/5/8 of an inch. So slightly smaller than a 1/34 of an inch, which is what most people will use. So it's a little bit smaller, and it collects into a 2.5 inch port here. So this would be for a 2.5 inch exhaust setup, which is probably what I'm going to be running. And for the power I'm trying to output, this will be plenty. My coworker just built an engine for a friend, or built a truck, and he threw in a 5.3 and used these same size headers, and that was making about 460 horsepower. So that's going to be plenty for what I'm going for. And the difference between a 2.5 inch exhaust and a 3 inch exhaust, there's not really much of a power gain. It's more just for volume. So 2.5 inches is going to be a little bit quieter. And since I am going for a kind of low key swap, just like sound wise, I think 2.5 inch is going to be just perfect. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to throw these on. So another thing I noticed, I have a flaw about the Temu headers, which I'll actually put a link to where I bought them from, because I didn't actually buy them from Temu. I saw them on Temu for $90-something, and I instead went to the website that was selling them, because they have the company that makes them. So I went to their website and just bought them directly from them, because apparently when you buy these headers on Temu, some people were getting the wrong thing. So I saw in the reviews that some people weren't actually receiving headers. They were receiving like rock climbing equipment or whatever it was. So I ordered these straight from the company, so I was sure there wasn't going to be any kind of issue. And they did send me the headers, so I did not have that issue when I ordered it straight to the company. And it was cheaper. It was $80 just to buy it straight from the company, which I believe it's Vevor, Vevor, Vevor. They don't make car parts. They make like home equipment. Sorry, neighbors, but they make like home equipment. So it's kind of funny that they also happen to sell these headers. But they were $80, which is just wild. They're $80. They don't look bad. The welds look halfway decent. So it's pretty crazy. And I actually, when I had them at the shop, I did the thing with the Post-it notes and got an air gun from the air compressor, and it actually is pulling vacuum. So sounds funny. But yeah, so that's kind of cool. So another thing about these headers compared to a more expensive header setup. So obviously, pretty much every kind of header style like this is going to be pulling a vacuum through the other ports. So that essentially what that's for is just so it helps to pull out the exhaust gases when it's on an exhaust stroke. But the difference between this kind of setup, where they all just merge into the same spot, compared to a more expensive setup, is the way they come together is the tubes will kind of come together. It's kind of like a 2 to 1. So they come to 2, they come to 2, and then they come into 1. And how it's set up is so that while one is on, I believe, I could be saying this wrong. Someone just explain this to me very briefly. So I could be totally wrong. But from what I understand, when one, say this cylinder is on its compression stroke, it's set up so that way the one that's on its combustion or its exhaust stroke, they come together so that way it's pulling vacuum from just the one doing an exhaust stroke, not from all the other ones as two, from what I understand. So, and then this is all just, they're all pulling vacuum all the time from what I understand. So a more expensive header setup is obviously going to be better. You're probably making more power, and you'll probably be able to run a bigger 3-inch flange here for a bigger, louder exhaust. But for the power goals I have, these headers are going to work just fine, and they were $80. So I'm kind of excited to throw these on and see how they look while they're on the engine. And my other reason for buying $80 headers was because of possible clearance issues when it goes in the car. I don't think there will be any clearance issues with these headers since they are only short tube. But just in case there are, I can just toss these headers if they don't fit because they were $80. And I could buy quality headers, but I was worried that by the time I'm throwing the engine, or by the time I'm throwing the engine in the car, and if I find out they don't fit, it'd be too late to return them. So that's another reason I tried out these Temu headers. And I was just kind of curious too. I was like, $80 headers, like I wonder if they're any good. So I took the risk and I bought them, and it turned out to be worth it, or so far I think, knock on wood. So from what I understand, I hope this is flat. That's the other thing I haven't checked yet, if this surface is actually flat. We're about to find that out when we put it on. And one more thing, I keep thinking about this and forgetting to say it. One more thing, another downfall of the Temu headers is there was a lot of shipping damage. Main issues with the shipping was this dent right here, which is on the very tip, so I'm sure I'll be able to cut that and it'll be just fine. And the other shipping damage that occurred was the gaskets. One of the gaskets had a pretty nasty bend. This one right here had a tiny bend right there. Nothing crazy, but another one of the gaskets, oh, actually, now I'm thinking about it, it's already on. It was this little triangular gasket. One of them did have a pretty nasty bend on it. So that's another thing about it. They did just kind of throw them in the box. I mean, this part of the exhaust was literally poking through the box, so that's another thing. But I mean, they were $80, so I can't really complain, you know. Another thing, I don't know, this is just because of the block I'm using. Maybe it's different for the iron blocks, but the hardware I got sent, which doesn't actually look bad, but it was the wrong size. Here it is. These bolts, these are what they sent me for the actual exhaust. There's these other bolts for this piece. But for these that actually bolted onto the block, they were the wrong size. So maybe this is correct for different blocks, but for my aluminum block, it's not the right size. It's too big. They did fit this up here, so I'm not quite sure what this is for yet. I really have no clue. I want to say it's something for the, you know what I'm talking about, the coil or the plug wire. Maybe it's something for a bracket to hold it in place. I don't know, so I'm gonna hang on to these because also there's free hardware. Okay, so I did have to go buy new hardware so that way it would actually fit. Hopefully this actually fits. I did find a bolt that fit in my box, and I just brought it with me to be certain. So I did have to go buy hardware that fit, which looks like it does. Sweet. And I bought this hardware the same size as the one that they gave me, so it should work just fine. So let's go ahead and throw on this header here. All right, so we got our gasket here. Now, for some reason in the description, it said turbo headers, which typically turbo headers are reverse mounted, but these aren't reverse mount headers. They're just basic headers. I'm assuming that was something for the advertising, just so it reaches more people who are looking for headers, I guess. And I doubt these things can handle any kind of boost. But I'm pretty, no, because they wouldn't be handling boost on the exhaust side. Would they? I imagine there'd be more pressure. There must be more pressure than an NA setup because there's going to be back pressure. Oh, crap. We're going to have to relocate the oil filter. Have to move it somewhere because it's going to be in the way of the exhaust. All right, move the oil filter over here. Just got it hanging on zip ties around the dipstick. So now it should be good to put this on. Just going just like that. Boom. Okay, so let's get 2 bolts. And we'll get our gasket. I took 1 bolt out already. I took 2 bolts out already. And let's get our gasket. And I'll put this thing on. Just like that. Just gonna take 2 bolts. I'm gonna stick them through to hold that gasket in place. I'm doing the 2 outer bolts. And we are also gonna find out if this thing is even flat. As long as there's no gaps that are like huge, I can see my eyeballs, I think it'll be fine. This gasket should make up for any unevenness in the surface of this, the flange, whatever you want to call that. All right, so it's on, and I mean, it looks pretty flat. I don't see any ends coming up. This looks like it's coming a little bit, but I only tightened these 2 so far. But I mean, if there is anything, the gasket is taking care of it. So not bad at all. So we're going to tighten these down, and I'll get back to you once everything is tight and just kind of see how it looks. I'll probably go ahead and get that side because it's going to be exactly the same. And then, yeah, we'll just show it. It's going to be a short episode today. All right, so we got the engine here. Headers are on. Looks pretty good. I went to the hardware store. They didn't have enough flange, so I had to get the non-flange one. So I'll probably have to go and grab washers and put these back in with washers on them. But it's on. They look good. I got these things as tight as I could, and I just faced them straight up, since I'm assuming the wiring harness will come back here and around the bell housing to get on these O2 sensors. So I just put them straight up. I tightened these as tight as I could because I wasn't crazy about how the gasket worked. I don't know, it was weird. I wish I showed it before I put it on, but this thing came down, it came out kind of like flared a little bit, and then this thing went onto it. I'm sure that flare is there because this plate right here that my finger's running across slides up and down, and that flare keeps it from coming off the headers, and then this thing bolts onto it, and there's that gasket there, but the diameter of the gasket doesn't fit around the flare. So I don't really know how it works, so I just got it as tight as I could. That gasket still doesn't look super sandwiched, but since the diameter's a little bit smaller, it is probably sandwiched wherever it flares and bolts up to this. But I just got it as tight as I could. I don't even know if I could see it through there. So that's just what I did, and the weld held up, so pretty good. But yeah, we are pretty much done here. That's it for this episode. Got the Temu headers on the engine. I would rate these Temu headers, honestly, for what they are. Like, if you're just getting basic headers for what they are, I honestly give it 8 out of 10 for the price. Well, let's do 7 out of 10. 7 out of 10 for the Temu headers. Only because the shipping was crap. There was shipping damage. Well, that's part of the shipping being crap. So there was shipping damage. Doesn't have the cone in there. And the bolts aren't the right size, which maybe that's just for the aluminum block. Those 3 things deduct points. So 7 out of 10 for the Temu headers. I would say you get what you paid for, but honestly, I think you get more than what you paid for because it's $80 and you get like solid headers. They aren't gonna leak. The surface is flat. They're gonna work. They're gonna work for the power I'm trying to make. So yeah, I think 7 out of 10 for the Temu headers is pretty fair. Only reason it's that high is just because they were $80. $80, like, come on. $80 headers right here. But yeah, that's it for this episode. Come back for episode 7, where I'm not sure what we're gonna be doing for episode 7. It might be the trunnion kit, or maybe the wiring harness and the ECU, or maybe the crank pulley, or maybe even the flywheel or the starter. So we got some stuff to figure out though, so I'll see you next episode.